בבודה, בדהרמה ובקהילה העילאית מבקש מקלט עד להערה. באמצעות המצבורים של הקשבה לדהרמה לא השיג בודהיות כדי להועיל ליצורים הנודדים. בבודה, בדהרמה ובקהילה העילאית מבקש מקלט עד להערה. באמצעות המצבורים של הקשבה לדהרמה לא השיג בודהיות כדי להועיל ליצורים הנודדים. בבודה, בדהרמה ובקהילה העילאית אבקש מקלט עד להערה. באמצעות המצבורים של הקשבה לדהרמה לא השיג בודהיות כדי להועיל ליצורים הנודדים. עמוד 15. אדמה זו המשוחה בקטורת ועטורה פרחים, העדויה בהר מרו, בארבע היבשות, בשמש ובירח. אעלה בדמיוני בעולם הבודה והגישה כמנחה. לכל היצורים הנודדים ייהנו בעולם טהור זה. אידם גורו רטנה מנדלה קם נריית הימי.
So yesterday we didn't really have time for questions. There'll be time for questions today. Yes.
Questions now?
No. No, we'll have questions towards the end. So I'll give half an hour of question time. So anyway, just to briefly summarize what we talked about yesterday. Most importantly, we talked about the definition of consciousness, awareness consciousness. Now, this is definitely not a usual way of talking. In Dharamsala, there's a group, a study group, and there's a man from Texas. And he expressed it in the most beautiful way. He said, the way the Dharma is expressed, we just don't talk like that in Texas. I can't really do it, but anyway, so it's just so true. We don't talk like that. I mean, even though it's English, or even if you put it in Hebrew or any other language you feel comfortable with, well, we just don't talk like that. But I guess it's also not like an everyday concept we talk about. I mean, this is something new, so the language, of course, is new. But I've been thinking for quite a number of years now, how could it be put differently? But I still believe the Tibetans have figured out a way that is the most accessible. But still, I think oftentimes when we hear the definition of consciousness, that which is clear in knowing, I guess we get a bit of an exaggerated sense of what's actually meant with this. So that which is luminous, like the consciousness being described as that which is luminous, like a torch or something. I mean, it's not really that's like kind of illuminated. You sit in the dark, and because you have a mind, everything lights up. It's more subtle than that. So mind or awareness or consciousness is luminous because it illuminates an object, or it's clear in the sense that something can appear to it. It's like a mirror. Our mind is a mirror of everything else around us. So maybe the definition would be that which is a mirror and knowing. But anyway, if you get the idea that it's behind it, not saying that it's like a lamp or something, it's really like just something that can reflect phenomena. Okay? Phenomena can appear to the mind. That's why the mind is luminous. And then the second part, well, it's knowing. Also, it cannot be taken literally that every mind knows its object. Anyway, we come to that. What does it mean to know something? What does it mean to realize, understand something? To be knowing just means the mind has the potential to know things. It can know anything. So it can cognize things, it can perceive things, it can hold them. The Tibetan word is really hold. Not in the definition. When you have the definition, in Tibetan, sel means clear, shing means and, sel shing, rikpa means knowing. Sel shing rikpa, so that which is clear and knowing. However, usually the ability of the mind, so the first part being clear reflects the nature of the mind, that things can just appear to the mind. And then the latter part, from the nature of the mind in the sense of more like a passive kind of nature, things just appear to the mind. Whereas being knowing, the latter part of the definition, refers to a more active function of the mind, the function of the mind to hold something. The Tibetan word is zimba, which means to hold. In an everyday kind of usage of the word, it just means to hold. So mentally hold something. Be aware, be conscious of it. And then there's different ways we become aware, be conscious. It can be stronger, it can be less strong. Anyway, so mind and its object, they're mutually dependent. Whatever is a mind has an object. If something is existent, if something is an object, there's a mind that apprehends it. Also something to point out, when I use the word phenomenon, I actually mean something that exists. So I think there's different meanings of the word. Oftentimes people have a sense of phenomenon as something spooky, something weird, kind of mysterious phenomenon. There was a phenomenon. I mean, I've talked to Americans, for example. They didn't know exactly that phenomenon can also refer to existent. So they had a different sense of the word. So when I use the word phenomena, I talk about something that exists, as opposed to something that cannot exist. Right? Phenomena that are not existent, such as a permanent table, a table that does not change moment by moment. I don't know, Barack Obama on this table right now. The existence of Barack Obama on this table, that's a non-existent. Okay, so certain things we can definitely, we can wait a little bit, yeah. Okay, anyway, so certain things we don't know whether they exist or not, but certain things we can very much, we can determine that they don't exist. Right now, even now we can determine. So therefore, a phenomenon is something that does exist. And whatever exists, for it to exist, there must be a mind to perceive it. Actually, I was asked a question, but I'll keep that question towards the end. Okay, so whoever gave me that paper, I'll keep that to the end. Okay, so the mind having that ability, or the consciousness, awareness being such, now the challenge is really to get an understanding ourselves of this. Okay, so I would like to continue to encourage you, when you hear about this, well, see whether there's some way you could apply this to your own experience, which is easy. The mind is there, it's right there, it's the easiest thing. It's not like you need to experiment with something that is just not available right now. See with your own mind and awareness, is there really something that appears to the mind? Right now, as you look at me, as you look at phenomena, is there something appearing, and is there something you're aware of? Are there phenomena that appear and we are not aware of? That's harder to determine, of course, because with that mind, if we're not aware of them, how can we know? So it's another mind that would then start investigating. But with the subtle particles, for example, if you can't see my body right now, you say you see my body, or the eye consciousness perceives the body, well, the subtle particles, the eye consciousness cannot be aware of, the subtle atoms. So with another awareness, we can reflect on the eye consciousness and its object and see, well, what could logically the mind be aware of, and what is it that appears but the mind is not aware of. Okay? And most importantly, of course, understanding that even though we have so many different awarenesses, so many, at each moment there's so many different ones, one arising after the other, and nevertheless, there's always a mistaken aspect. Phenomena appear to us in a way in which they can impossibly exist. It's impossible for them to exist in that way. Okay. But let's get back to the second category that we started last night. We started talking about last night. So we talked about the category of wrong consciousnesses and correct consciousnesses. Just from the point of view of the object. The object exists, it's a correct consciousness. The object doesn't exist, it's a wrong consciousness. Okay? And then after class, I discussed this with Venerable Рита, and she also mentioned a passage in a text by Ngenlam Rinpa, a book called, what's it called, the book?
It's a book on emptiness. I think it's Realizing Emptiness, maybe.
It's called Realizing Emptiness, a book on emptiness, where Ngenlam Rinpa explains the same idea about a wrong consciousness. What is a wrong consciousness as opposed to a correct consciousness? Being a mind that misunderstands or understands its object wrongly. Okay, whereas a correct consciousness, it gets at its object correctly. In the sense, well, in one case the object of engagement doesn't exist, and in the other case it does exist. Okay? So, this is not to say that when something doesn't exist and we are aware of it, but we nevertheless take it to mind, that is a wrong consciousness. Okay, for example, let's take the classic examples, horns of a rabbit. Horns of a rabbit, if I perceive those to be non-existent, well then that's correct, right? Because the horns of a rabbit are non-existent. It's only when I perceive, oh, horns of a rabbit, as if they were right there in front of me, well that's when I have a wrong consciousness. So there's a bit of a difference. Perceiving something like horns of a rabbit, like right there are horns of the rabbit. That's a wrong consciousness. Or perceiving horns of a rabbit, they don't exist. So I take to mind, in the second scenario, I take to mind the horns of a rabbit, but I know they're not existent. So the object of engagement is the non-existence of horns of a rabbit. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. Anyway, so we then got to speak about sense consciousnesses. So after wrong and correct consciousnesses, which are defined on the basis of, well, does the object of engagement exist or not? Now then we moved on to sense and mental consciousness. That was the second category that I mentioned. Sense and mental consciousness. And we differentiate between those two types of awarenesses on the basis of the object and the cause. What leads to the arisal of a sense consciousness, for example? What leads to the arisal of a mental consciousness? What are the causes and conditions responsible? So, the object and the causes and conditions, they determine whether a mind is a sense consciousness or a mental consciousness. So sense consciousness, we've basically seen eye consciousness, there's 5 of them. So eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and body consciousness. Are you aware of the order? Why this order? Eye consciousness first, ear consciousness second, nose consciousness. Yeah, exactly. It's like, you start up here, then you go here. Well, some people, maybe their noses are higher than their ears, but usually it's kind of like the ears are higher, then the nose, then the mouth, then the body. That's what it says according to the Abhidharma Kosha. Anyway, so when you have those 5 consciousnesses, the order just described, the difference between them, it's really, we shouldn't think of the eye consciousness and the eye as itself. It's just an awareness, it's an experiencer. And depending on how it arises, and depending on which object it has, we call it an eye consciousness. So it's not the eye. Okay? The eye is just the cause for this awareness to arise. Therefore, there's 3 causes. 3 causes. And 3 causes for the eye consciousness to arise. They cause something different. They're responsible for a different ability of the mind. So if we start with the immediately preceding conditions, actually when we talk about what they cause, it's better to start with the immediately preceding conditions. So if I have an eye consciousness that perceives this cup, the immediately preceding condition is a former moment of consciousness, a former moment of awareness. So the fact that my eye consciousness can have something appear to it and can hold on to something, be aware of something, that the responsibility for that lies in the former moment. Right? If I did not have a former moment of consciousness, if hypothetically there was no awareness at all, I could not have an eye consciousness that suddenly takes something to mind, experiences an object. Does that make sense? Okay. Then the second, now starting from it's always the second, whether you start from the bottom or from the front. So the empowering condition. The empowering condition of the eye consciousness that perceives the cup is the physical sense power, the physical, whatever you want to call it. It's said to be a very subtle form in the eye. But I think a subtle form really means all the physical aspects that are responsible for the arisal of an eye consciousness. So the subtle, the nerves, the electrons that pass on the information to the brain and so forth. So this is actually quite subtle when you come to that level. So this is responsible for the eye consciousness being able to perceive pot. So previously it was just being able to perceive being luminous and being knowing, the previous immediately preceding condition. Now this one is more specifically able to be aware of pot, of something that has shape and color. That's the eye consciousness. Okay? So that is more specific here. The responsibility with the eye sense power, the responsibility of the eye sense power, which is the cause of the eye consciousness, it more specifically is responsible for the eye consciousness perceiving a pot. Sorry, not pot, perceiving a cup. Okay. All right, and then the last cause for the eye consciousness, which is the observed object condition, which is the cup itself. The cup itself is responsible for the eye consciousness perceiving cup and nothing else. Right? Previously it was just perceiving a shape and color such as the pot. Now the pot was, I keep saying pot, that's what it says in the text. No, the cup. So the cup itself, that is what is responsible for the eye consciousness perceiving the cup and nothing else. You can see how each and every cause, each and every condition, causes and condition here meaning the same thing, they're responsible for something the eye consciousness can do. Does that make sense? So usually in our text, it's very specifically described. What does each cause do? What does it lead to? What does it cause, basically? So therefore we have then 5 different consciousnesses, sense consciousnesses, and each one has a unique object. Right? So the eye consciousness only perceives shape and color, the ear consciousness only sounds. There's no way that an ear consciousness could ever perceive shape and color or taste or anything else. So they're very limited with what they can perceive. So dependent on these causes that come together and lead to their arisal. The mental consciousness is different. The mental consciousness has more freedom. It does not depend on an object out there. It does not depend on a physical sense power. That's why our sense consciousnesses, when we are asleep, they're not present. They don't have to be present. They are absorbed, they dissolve into subtler minds. But the mental consciousness is still there, because even though physically there's no activity, there's no taking in of the external, during deep sleep especially, therefore the mental consciousness can still function, because it doesn't need to depend on those objects. The sense consciousnesses don't function at those times. Okay. So then in this reading here, I just gave you, just briefly, the 3 causes of an eye consciousness. So the observed object condition, shape and color, the empowering condition, the physical eye sense power, and then immediately preceding condition, well, a former moment of consciousness. And then the same for the eye consciousness, except that now the object is sound, the ear consciousness, sorry. The ear consciousness, the observed object is sound, the empowering condition is the ear sense power, whatever that includes, and the immediately preceding condition, again, a former moment of consciousness. And then all the way through. So, therefore, sense consciousnesses, why are they important? Are they important? Are they really that important? Well, of course, I mean, for us to be human beings, they're extremely important. I mean, everything we know, we've learned through our sense consciousnesses. So, extremely important, like through our everyday life. Also, from a Dharma point of view, of course, if we weren't able to read books and listen to teachings and communicate with others, discuss things, well, we wouldn't be able to take the first step, basically, before we sit down to meditate. So they're extremely important. But on the other hand, they're also quite dangerous. I mean, dangerous means it's not their fault. But still, nevertheless, the problem is that our eye consciousnesses, because every time an eye consciousness arises, there's also a feeling, which will be explained a little bit further down. If there's a feeling of pleasure, seeing something pleasurable, right away we want it. We hold on to it. If there's a feeling of displeasure, we want to be separated from it. Possibly anger, resentment arises. And if there's not a feeling, a neutral feeling, there's just a kind of indifference towards it, which can lead to a kind of type of ignorance. Okay? So the 3 kind of main wrong consciousnesses that are mental, actually. They're not sense consciousnesses, but they're induced by such an eye consciousness. Okay? So there's positive and negative There's a danger with those consciousnesses. Well, the danger really lies with our mental consciousness, with our attitude towards phenomena, but still being aware to watch the doors of the I consciousness. So there's some great practitioners of the past, the Kadampa Geshes, that talk about what is most important in terms of one's practice is to watch the door of one's sense consciousnesses. Because whatever goes in, that in the next moment, there's some reaction. And that's when we need to be aware. So when there's a beautiful form, right away attachment, desire arises. If there's something negative, something we don't like, right away anger arises. Which is much more harmful to us than to the other person. Towards the anger is possibly directed. Anyway, but this is one of the first steps, understanding the sense consciousness. And what is so special about it, it perceives its object nakedly. That's the expression, it's a weird word, but in Tibetan it's actually nakedly, freshly, directly. It's a direct experiencer. Again, maybe new to some of you, this idea of freshly experience something. What does that mean? As opposed to what? Well, as opposed to what we'll explain. But this directly, like when we taste something, it's a uniqueness. Every time we experience something, it's actually very unique. Everything is unique. Again, we may not be so aware of it, but any experience, it's fresh, it's full of colors, like the I consciousness. It's just right there. It's what it is. Of course, there's the appearance of inherent existence, but leaving aside that, still there's the experience of the actual object, a direct experience. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's a fresh kind of mind. That is the advantage of the eye, of the sense consciousnesses. That is the good thing about it. Of course, the limitation is eye consciousness, ear consciousness. It can only take certain objects, and only those in the present. Only those in the sphere of our vision. Because the object and the sense power, they have to meet. That's the word again. That's described in Tibetan. It's actually meet. To meet. They meet. With the tongue consciousness, the body consciousness, and those consciousness, that's more obvious how they actually meet, because the particles actually meet with the sense power, and then a consciousness arises. Whereas with the eye and the ear, that's less obvious. But still, I guess, with the ear, it's kind of, it takes a while for the sound to get here. So there's really something entering the ear in a sense. And then with eye, it's the same, except something is reflected. Anyway. So this is the traditional way of describing the sense consciousnesses. An object and the mind, or the sense power meeting, and then a mind arises. And you have a fresh experience of something. Now, mental consciousnesses are different. Mental consciousness as opposed to sense consciousness. So mental consciousness is any awareness that is other than the sense consciousness. But it's so hard to separate the two, especially initially. The difference between a sense consciousness, where does the sense consciousness start, and where does the mental, and where does the mental consciousness start? Can you tell the difference right now? I don't think so. This is again where meditation comes in, and where basically for the time being, we have to take it on faith. It's not blind faith, of course. It's faith based on reasoning. But actually, honestly, most of what we think we know, we've taken on faith anyway. I read it online. I know it's like that, because I read it on Google. It's like, right? We use the word I know, I understand. I realize we use less. Yeah, we do. I realize that. But we use these words in a way in which, strictly speaking, in the Buddhist context, they're not used. I assume. The Buddhist way of describing I know something is actually I assume. Possibly assume it correctly. But to say I know means no matter what someone tells me, I'm totally convinced because I have first-hand experience. It's not like, today someone tells me coffee is good for you. Tomorrow they tell me, no, it's actually bad for you. So today I know it's good for me, tomorrow I know it's bad for me. I must have been wrong somewhere, because that's definitely contradictory. But oftentimes we think we know things, and actually we take them on faith. So faith has this connotation of being religious, but actually it isn't. Scientists tell us we have faith. But it's not blind faith. It's faith because what they tell us have no reason to lie to us. These are people who investigate that have measured certain phenomena, they've analyzed them, they've investigated them, and they came to some conclusion. And they just share with us what they've come to know. And then we assume it's correct. We say, oh, I know, this is what scientists have said. The same idea applies in Buddhism. Like Buddha he came to some conclusion, he's done his investigation, his analysis, he came to a conclusion, and not just the Buddha, other people, other highly realized beings who have come to special insight, who have reached special insights. So they just share what they've learned, and then when it makes sense, we can take it on faith, and if it doesn't make sense, well, let's just leave it. And it's very important to understand it's temporary faith. It's only supposed to be temporary until we can come to a first-hand understanding. Yeah? And we do that all the time. We have faith in how the toaster works. I mean, I've never sat down to understand how a toaster works, but I believe in the instructions. I have faith in that. Faith based on reasoning. Our globe is round. I mean, someone really proved tomorrow it was squared. I'll be all right. Squared then. Because I haven't realized, I haven't known, I haven't made the effort to understand the reasons why. Well, my teacher told me, my mom told me so, and no reason to distrust her. Of course, the classic examples, I don't want to bore you with the classic examples. The day we were born. I mean, I trust I was born on that day, but I don't know. For all I know, my mom could have been wrong, the doctor could have been wrong, right? But I take it on faith. I know I was born on that day, but, do I really know? Actually, I don't. I don't remember. And yeah, there's always a margin of error from the side of my mom and the doctors and so forth. Anyway, so here likewise, with the sense consciousness and the mental consciousness, I've taken that on faith. I have no way to understand it. Why? Because our mind is like a movie. Can you see each and every picture of the movie? No. We just see the flow of the movie. It's like a line on a computer. Can you see each pixel that makes the line? No. Right? All we see is the line. So likewise, with our mind, we just see this happening, this fluid, this fluid moving of the mind. And it seems like one mind. Actually, it's many, many moments. And we don't see many, many moments, just as we don't see many, many pixels when we see the line on the screen. But there's said to be a sense consciousness first that takes in the raw data, the things around us. And even though it doesn't seem that way, it can actually know table. The eye consciousness. The table is a shape and color. Okay, or has a shape and color, but it's also a shape. This is a little weird. Table is shape. Bread. What is bread? Is bread shape? Yes. Is bread sound? Is bread taste? Is bread smell? Or is bread a tangible object? What do you think? All of them. Oh, there is a problem. Strictly speaking, from a Buddhist point of view, then an eye consciousness and an ear consciousness perceives the same object. It's sound. Bread makes a sound, has a sound. It has a shape, it has a color. But there's a difference between saying something is a shape or is a taste as opposed to having one. So strictly speaking, from a Buddhist point of view, bread is taste. Because even though it has all those characteristics, the one that is responsible for us determining that it's bread is the taste. Whether it's red, blue, squared, rough, smooth, it doesn't matter. It's the taste that determines whether it's bread or not. Okay, you can still argue. I mean, it's just conventional. How about the table? No matter what it tastes like, no matter what it smells like, no matter whether it's smooth or rough or hot or cold, it depends on the shape. Right? So shape, it's the shape that determines whether it's a table or not. Okay? Therefore, it's said to be an object of eye consciousness. Perfume, no matter the color, the shape, whatever, it's the smell. Therefore, perfume is said to be... So some people argue, well, what about bread? Right? Isn't that... And it gets a little tricky here. Garlic, what about garlic? Is that a taste or a smell? It's a taste, you would say, because something you eat, but it's very much determined by the smell. So this is, it's a little hard to determine here, but in general, and it's not terribly important, but you get how we say that these objects of the senses, they're not, whatever the eye consciousness perceives, the ear consciousness does not perceive, and the tongue consciousness does not perceive. So when the eye consciousness perceives bread, actually it perceives the shape and color of bread. And when we eat it, then we perceive bread, which is the taste. Okay, it's not important. It's not really important for this course, but it's all about precision. It's all about determining what does each mind perceive. It's important to better understand the mind, to be very precise. Okay. Anyway, the mental consciousness and the sense consciousness, they do arise simultaneously. That's the problem. Or if they don't arise simultaneously, in very quick succession. So my eye consciousness sees something, there's a raw data that the eye consciousness perceives, knows, possibly knows, table, okay? And then the mental consciousness does something with it. That's when we start thinking. Whatever is being provided, whatever information is provided by the eye consciousness, the mental consciousness now does something with it. It can label it, it can think about it, it can reflect on it, it can plan ahead, it can think, it can do so many things with it. So the mental consciousness is what we really need to understand. But the sense consciousness is still explained to differentiate the two. Does that make sense? So, those two minds. Right now, we cannot take them apart. So we need to rely on what the scriptures, what the masters of the past tell us. Well, they're not the same. They function slightly differently. But whatever one does, it has an influence on the other minds. They pass on information. They pass information. So whatever information the eye consciousness has received, it's passed on to the mental consciousness. So that's why whenever I talk to you, you hear the sound of my voice, and then you possibly start thinking about it, investigating it. That's not your ear consciousness. That is your mental consciousness. Okay? Also, what's so important is labeling. Because my eye consciousness cannot label anything. It doesn't label, it doesn't designate, it doesn't have a concept of something. It's my mental consciousness that does. And it goes both ways. Whatever information the eye consciousness passes on to the mental consciousness then labels, gives names. And that information is passed back on to the eye consciousness. Which explains the example last night of the blind woman. Remember the blind woman? She'd never been able to see, she was born blind, and when she was cured of her blindness and the bandage was taken off her eyes, she said she couldn't see anything. It was just a blur of colors. It was basically just colors. Okay. Why? Because she had not done what we have done since we were very little. We don't remember that time. That's the problem. We don't remember how slowly out of the blur of colors around us, we started crystallizing things out. Because every time we saw the face of our mother, right, it was like a regularity to it, and then eventually the mental consciousness was able to go, well, probably not mother right away, but provider of food or milk person or whatever. It wasn't even a word as such, but just a concept, an idea. And so we were able to slowly crystallize out this face as opposed to everything else that was not that face. We started labeling. Labeling just means taking something out and negating everything that is not that. Right? And then every time this face appeared, that characteristic, we react to that. We've had a concept of that person. It's actually never the same. It's never the same. Of course, this person, our mother, changes all the time. She's never exactly the same. But we have a concept of mother. That concept has become stronger and stronger, and it's passed back onto the eye consciousness, which can now see mother. And we do it with all the other objects, tables and glasses and chairs. Now we walk into a room, we don't have to think, what is that shape and color? What is that? We've drawn these lines around things mentally already. The information has been passed on. So we come into a room, we can see three-dimensional, we know where to sit on, we don't need to reflect, we know. Because whatever concepts we have of phenomena, the eye consciousness can now perceive those objects, as opposed to other objects. Does that make sense? That is an extremely important concept in Buddhism. This idea that what we see, we take that for granted. It seems it's from the object side, as if it was always like that. Because we don't remember when we were born and when it was just a blur of color. And even though we've lived before, well, 50% chance we did, we've forgotten. So whatever information we've had in the past, well, that disintegrated at the time we died in our previous life, and we had to start anew again. This is what's so frustrating. We have to do it all over again. Okay. So, but the point is, our eye consciousness and our mental consciousness, they're in very close communication. And what we perceive right now, we take it for granted, but if we were blind from birth, we would not perceive this. We would not perceive a microphone. And this is where I'm saying, it's kind of weird if we think about this. It's like, how could this person not see a microphone? Why is this weird? Because to us, this appears inherently from its own side. That's the only reason why we think it's so weird. We're not aware that the only reason we perceive this microphone is because of our own mind. Our mind created the microphone. It put the lines around them, created this concept of microphone, and every time we see something similar, well, now we see microphone. But there's no microphone from its own side. It's just shape and color. I mean, we see a very, very solid line where it starts and ends. Actually, that's also not true. I mean, if you talk to a physicist, to a molecular physicist, where does the molecules of my hand start? We don't know. It's not that clearly defined. But our mind, being so used to phenomena, exists concrete, having an essence, having something from its own side. Things are very clearly laid out to us. So it's just from the mind, from the side of the mind, it's not from the side of the object. Understanding this, I mean, this is difficult, and we talk much more about this, well, during the third course, which is about reality. A lot more explanation needs to come in regarding that. But even with the mind, I mean, it is important to bring this up, because that's why we explain the mind in the first place. How does this work? How does the eye consciousness communicate with the mental consciousness? The eye consciousness gives the raw data comes back to the mental consciousness, and now the eye consciousness can see things it was previously unable to see. Right? So, the classic example, I keep saying pot, pot, pot. Actually, pot is not a good word. It should be vase. Because I don't know whether you've seen in many Tibetan monasteries there are vases, like they're called initiation vases. So I guess I'm just thinking, well, a teacher in the past, there was probably always a vase sitting, so they could just point out and say, hey, look at this vase. They didn't have elephants and cars and, we don't have them here right either. But anyway, so tables, not necessarily. So the classic example now in the West is tables, but really in the scripture it talks about pot or vase. It's just the word has been used as pot, but think of it as an initiation vase. So if you just take the example of a vase, there's even a definition for a vase. I mean, why would you have to define a vase of all things? But still, it's being defined. It's a flat-based, pot-bellied object, round-bellied object, able to perform the function of holding water.
Okay, can I just...
Yes, please.
If you look at the objects on the table, you can't see them.
Oh.
It's the third one after the fish and before the
On
flower.
this side, the outer side of the
Yeah.
table, we can see it.
It's the auspicious signs.
There's a vase. Oh yeah, here. That's the
There,
one?
yes.
Yeah. Okay, if you have good eyes, you may be able to perceive a vase right here, yeah. So a vase. Anyway, it's the classic example. Why? I mean, the reason being is something easy to understand, everyone can see it. So how are we able to perceive a vase? Well, for the first time, we were able to see a shape and color. And then the mental consciousness at some point, through training, someone probably told us the name vase. And if someone didn't tell us, we started creating a concept, an idea of that. And then every time, so first the eye consciousness was not aware of vase. It just saw a blur of shape and color. But then the mental consciousness imputed, that information was passed on to the eye consciousness, and now the eye consciousness can actually know, oh, there is a vase. This is a vase. The eye consciousness can do that. Okay. But only because of the concept we have of the vase. Right. So I hope this explains this, how we can actually, with our eye consciousnness, walk into a room and know right away, this is here, this is there. We don't bump into things. I think the blind woman, she can't, I mean, if I don't know her sense of three-dimensional, but I don't think, in the beginning she wouldn't be able to see three-dimensional. So she would bump into things, not knowing what's first, what's after. We take that for granted because it appears to exist from its own side. It doesn't. This world out there doesn't exist like that. what we only perceive because we've labeled. Right? And actually we don't even know. I mean, if I had someone else's eyes, I don't even know whether someone else's blue was my green. Honestly, do we have any way of telling? I mean, whether the colors we perceive are the same? Okay? I mean, definitely we do say, oh, beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. We say so, but it doesn't really feel that way. Oh, you think that's ugly? I think that's beautiful. How come? Oh, just because we've imputed differently, our minds are differently. We have a totally different perception of reality, of beauty, of ugliness. And because we grew up in a similar society, well, we probably all agree that hummus is delicious and olives are too. But talk to a Tibetan and they go, ooh, olives? I mean, Tibetans really don't like olives, at least the ones I know. Anyway, so we have a similar upbringing, so we agree on things, but actually every one of us has a totally unique experience of reality. Is there any other reality but the summary of our experiences? No, there isn't. There's no other reality. So it really comes just down back to the mind. Why it's therefore so important to understand how the mind provides us with our reality that seems to be out there, objectively out there. Does that make sense so far? Okay. So, this basically explains there's two types of mind, sense consciousnesses and mental consciousnesses, and they communicate with each other. They communicate in a very strong way. And so there's other examples that will be given to you later on. If I feel a certain way, my sense consciousness sees certain things. Great sadness, when there's great sadness, someone I'm very close to dies, this blue sky is gray. It seems gray, right? We all have that experience. When something horrific happens, the eye consciousness, the colors are not as vivid anymore. So you see how they're closely connected. Or we're newly in love. Oh, it's just pink, bright blue. The colors change. Right? So our emotional, mental state can very much influence what we see. So the mental consciousness is very powerful. It's the most powerful thing there is. It's not nuclear weapons. It's not, I don't know, what have you. From a Buddhist perspective, the most powerful thing there is in the world is the mental consciousness. Can you imagine? And each one of us has one. We're so lucky. But right now, we're like sitting in this really fast plane. That's like this most powerful thing. Let's take a common example. We just don't know how to drive it. We're like in this, oh, I'm sure you have them. The Israeli army must have them. Those supersonic planes that go really fast. Right? They're so powerful. So if we know how to drive them, I mean, not drive, you don't say drive. If you know how to fly them, I mean, it's so great. We can do so much with these planes. But right now, we're sitting in this amazingly powerful thing, and it drives us. It controls us. We're not in charge. And this is why, well, we first learn about the plane to understand how to actually control it. So the mental consciousness, the most powerful thing there is. But unfortunately, we don't know of its power. This is why we have Buddha nature. This is why it said we have Buddha nature. We're not Buddhas yet. But we have all the ingredients. We have this incredibly powerful mind that can do so much. We only need to take the steering wheel in our own hand and start steering it in the right direction. So it's actually very positive, right? I mean, we just, whatever problems we have, they're actually just in here. The external, it doesn't really play such a great role. I mean, we think it does, but actually it doesn't. Okay. Anyway. But let's get back to this. So just understand the importance. We're trying to understand the most powerful thing we have. We have something so amazingly beautiful and so powerful. And just trying to understand it, the first step to start controlling it and experience more happiness. And seriously, I believe the Buddhist path, it's not always smooth. But it's a stairway to happiness. I mean, that's a stupid thing to say, but it's actually the more... I mean, forget about enlightenment and liberation. Okay, these are the main goals, but they're not easy. They're not easily accessible. However, in the meantime, just to improve the quality of our life, if we gain more control of the mental consciousness, the quality of our lives improves, and there's more happiness. And that's when you see these high lamas sometimes. I mean, whatever happens around them, it doesn't affect them. because they have such amazing control over their own minds, over their own emotions. And they're just really happy and content, no matter what happens. Anyway, so therefore, sense consciousness and mental consciousness, they're not the same, they're different. And the mental consciousness is the one that is most important. But let's stay a little bit with the sense consciousness to understand them better, just for the sake of completion. So everything else that follows will be more on the mental consciousnesses. But there's just a little bit more I'd like to talk about regarding the sense consciousnesses, because they are important even during meditation. Sense consciousnesses are important during meditation. So, if you've seen the reading, I categorize sense consciousnesses in sense consciousnesses that are direct perceivers and those that are wrong consciousnesses. So direct perceivers or wrong consciousnesses. That's just the terminology. A direct perceiver means a mind that directly apprehends its object. Correctly apprehends its object. So the word direct perceiver does not just imply that you directly perceive something, but you directly get at something. And then you have sense consciousnesses that are wrong consciousnesses. We've explained those before, but there's a bit of an explanation that I'd like to introduce, because sense consciousnesses are used as examples all the time. And maybe from some of the examples you recognize, something that you've read in the scriptures, for example. So sense consciousnesses that are direct perceivers, they're again categorized. And I apologize for these categories, but that is, I think, the most effective way to understand this, but just giving you very systematic divisions of things. Okay? So if you have some sense of that, then if you understand those divisions, if you've even memorized them, it becomes easy. It sounds first very confusing, and Tibetans are great about dividing and categorizing. But really, if you look at modern science, that's what modern science does too, to get a better understanding, categorizing things. So, direct perceivers can be categorized into direct perceivers that actually realize their objects, know them incontrovertibly, or awarenesses to which an object appears but is not ascertained. Okay, what do those mean? First, an eye consciousness that knows something, that realizes something. So here I'm using the same word because it is used in Tibetan. Shepa, tokpa, tseme tokpa. So like know, understand, realize. Okay? Know, understand, realize. What does it mean to realize? What does it mean to know? What does it mean to understand? So I like, in this context, in the context of understanding the mind, I want to use those terms interchangeably. As being synonymous. Because strictly speaking, they are. So, of course, it's all right to say, I know the globe is round. I know how a toaster works. That's okay in everyday life. But when talking in the Buddhist context, to know means something more specific. And the criterion for knowing, what does it mean to know something? And it's not easy to understand that. But usually it's described as if we know something, no matter what someone else tells us, we're not going to be swayed by that. That's a good way of finding out, do I know something or not? If I know this is my child, okay, and then the child disappears and someone else brings along another child and says, this is your child. I either can be fooled or I can't. But if I know this is not my child, then they can tell me whatever they want. I'm not going to believe it. Right? I'm just thinking of examples. It happened in India before. It probably happened in other countries too. A child disappeared and the police wanted to get rid of the case and just brought another child. And it's like the mother was like, no way, just kicking and screaming. She would not have it. So, to know something means no matter what someone tells you, it's not going to do anything. If you know coffee is bad for you, scientists can, put things online and write in newspapers, whatever, you wouldn't be swayed by that. Okay, so that's the criterion. Moreover, if our eye consciousness knows something, it passes on the information to a mental consciousness. So what we know with the eye consciousness, we then know mentally too. It's even deeper, that understanding. So you have eye consciousnesses that know. Okay. Then you have eye consciousnesses that are still direct perceiver. They still correctly perceive something. But it's an awareness to which an object appears, but later on there's no ascertainment. There's no mental consciousness that ascertains it. Actually, most of our sense consciousnesses are like that. Right now, Okay, the moment I say it, it's not the case anymore. But right now, your body consciousness is an awareness to which an object appears but is not ascertained. Because you're not aware of the fabric of your clothes. But right now, you're probably aware the moment I say it. Right? So are you in your nose consciousness? If someone else asks you later on, because what is most active is your eye consciousness and your ear consciousness right now. Well, hopefully, they are the ones most active. It's not our nose consciousness. So the smell in this room, if someone else later on said, well, did you notice the smell? We'd probably go, no. Because it's an awareness to which the smell appears. But it's not known, not understood, not realized, and there's no mental consciousness that ascertains the smell in this room. This is an awareness to which an object appears but is not ascertained. And actually, though while we are awake, our sense consciousnesses are always present. But there's no way that after a long day we can go to bed and we know exactly what happened right in the morning, what we saw, all the way to the evening time. No, because most of our awarenesses are awareness to which an object appears but is not ascertained. Does that make sense? Okay. So the eye consciousness can perceive things. When we want to perceive something, when we pay attention, we can perceive it. However, most of the time we're engrossed in other things. Right? Our mental consciousness, very active. A time of strong emotions, we don't see anything anymore. We don't hear anything. I mean, it's the most conducive state to be in when you want to meditate. Because if we don't have sense consciousnesses that are awarenesses to which the object appears but is not ascertained, we cannot meditate. Right? If I keep my eyes open and I see the pattern in this carpet and I'm totally aware of whatever speck of dust is in front of me, very hard to have the mental consciousness reflect on anything. So during meditation, we want to develop an awareness to which an object appears but is not ascertained. Right? Okay, so they're helpful. Also, what else? So understanding that, so there's a mind that realizes its object. That's when we try to meditate and we realize the speck of dust in front of us. Right? That's an awareness that realizes its object. It ascertains a mental consciousness, possibly thinking, that vacuum cleaner didn't do its job, or whatever. So we start reflecting on it, we start thinking about it. So that's where an eye consciousness realizes its object. Okay? Right now, I perceive your faces. So later on, if someone says, I was in your course, I'll remember, because why? The eye consciousness perceived your body, then that was passed on to the mental consciousness, then I reflected on that, and even if it's just a short moment, and then there was something left, a residue was left, it's called an imprint, and so later on I can recollect, that person was in the course. Okay. But the sounds outside, the feeling of the fabric on my body, I don't notice those. So these are awarenesses to which an object appears is not ascertained, and thus I have no recollection of them later on. Also, right now, I'm doing a few things at the same time. Okay? Well, more specifically, I think when we watch a movie or when we drive a car, there's many things we do at the same time. We have different sense consciousnesses that operate. Anyway, all sense consciousnesses all operate at the same time. I think we can all agree on that. They're always there. As long as we don't sleep, they're always there. And they seem to be operating, I say seem to be operating at the same time. We can watch a movie, listen to it, get a massage. What else? Have a bit of perfume in front of us and eat a sandwich. Right? And reflect on the movie. So it seems to be we have the 6 consciousnesses there at the same time. But that's actually an illusion. Because simultaneously, when it comes down to one moment, to like a small moment, we actually don't have all 6 simultaneously. When the eye consciousness realizes what happens on the screen, in that moment the ear consciousness can't hear. But if it's just a split second, and if they alternate very quickly, then that's not a problem. We don't miss anything. Okay? But, what we miss is not sufficient to have like a hole in our perception, in the sense that later on we don't remember what has happened. So it's basically that simultaneously we don't have the 6 consciousnesses, but they change so rapidly, right? They're so rapidly, just as a movie changes different frames of pictures so rapidly, we're not aware of it. So it seems we're doing it simultaneously, but we don't. When the eye consciousness perceives something, the remaining sense consciousnesses become awarenesses to which an object appears but is not ascertained. And the mental consciousness now does not become an awareness to which an object appears is not ascertained, because that's not used, that word is not used for a mental consciousness. An awareness to which an object appears but is not ascertained is always a sense consciousness. In the Prasangika, from the Prasangika school point of view, it's always a sense consciousness. So therefore, there's no problem with that. I mean, there's no way of calling a mental consciousness an awareness to which an object appears but is not ascertained. So in the moment when our eye consciousness realizes something, the other sense consciousnesses become such awareness, and the mental consciousness just becomes a mind that doesn't realize its object. Does that make sense? Doesn't realize its object. So it's only a split second later that we can then, whatever the eye consciousness, the information it provides us, the mental consciousness thinks about it. And then the ear consciousness sets in. And then the sandwich tasting, sandwich experiencing, tongue consciousness sets in. And then the massage. Okay? So whatever. Whatever is the situation, but they don't function at the same time. Only ever just one is a mind that realizes its object. Does that make sense? But they're still all direct perceivers. Because there's still a perception. There's still a perception, there's still an awareness, but it's not strong enough to actually consciously be aware, if you like. There's no mental consciousness that is induced. And to be aware, we always have to have a mental consciousness. So a moment of sense consciousness that then induces a mental consciousness. Just in a split second. Awareness, actually, only happens if a sense consciousness induces a mental consciousness. That's when there's enough information, or there's enough happening that we can say we are aware. Then recollection can set in.
You have to believe you.
No, you don't have to believe me. You should investigate whether that's the case or not, right? I mean, on this, investigate it until maybe you get a first-hand experience yourself. And that would be the best case scenario. And then in the meantime, see whether you can take it on faith, because other things that I've said make sense. And it's not what I make up, of course, it's what the Buddha said. So that there's explanation that the Buddha provides us that we can actually understand. And on the basis of that, there's other information that right now we cannot understand, but we can choose to believe. Just as you believe you were born on a certain day, your mom and dad didn't have any reason to lie to you. So then you believe it. Until maybe one day you have some clairvoyant ability that allows you to go back and kind of see it for yourself which day you were born. Right? Okay, so this is something important. Buddhism is about faith. I said this before, and I need to stress this again. Buddhism does stress the importance of faith, but so does science. Right? I mean, you definitely have faith in the existence of an atom. Do you know 100% they're atoms? Have you seen one? Have you experienced one? No, I don't think so. And even if you've seen it through a microscope, is that possible through these electrical microscopes? How do you know it's not a trick? I mean, you can do lots of things with microscopes. You can do lots of things with movies and what have you. We don't know, right? So actually, so many things we think we know, we don't know. We take them on faith. Because the person who tells us there's no reason to lie, and they have told us other things that do make sense. That's the same idea in Buddhism. The Buddha tells us things we can know right away. And understanding the qualities of the Buddha, and of course, this is not part of this course. This will be a different class or a different course when we talk about the qualities of the Buddha. But nevertheless, the qualities of the Buddha, understanding them, one comes to see, well, the Buddha had so much compassion, and his main concern with others was our benefit, our happiness. And he had great wisdom. So if someone has great wisdom, has great compassion, why should they lie to us? Anyway, who would lie about that? Who cares? Right? It's not important. It's not like you get a lot of money or something. It's like, or have any other benefit. But the point is temporarily, to take it on faith and then see if there's something to it. And slowly come to see, yeah, actually I've never really noticed, but now I notice. Right? It's difficult, I know that one. The one, especially that one, everyone struggles with the sense consciousnesses and the mental, to actually take those apart. that they cannot realize something simultaneously. How can we know? Okay. So it's like with a movie, it's easy. As long as the movie goes very fast, we can't know, but we can slow down the movie and can come to see each picture. Well, we can slow down the mind, but that's much harder. Or become aware of each moment. That's the challenge. That's why I'm saying, don't just take it intellectually. Try and apply this to your own mind. Okay? Just every moment of the day. And there's so much time we have. I mean, we may be as busy as it gets. But there's so many moments, even when you're on the toilet, when you brush your teeth, there's a few moments. Right? Honestly. I mean, don't need to read the newspaper or just daydream, but maybe watch the mind. The tongue consciousness, experiencing this. The eye consciousness, what does it experience? So, move away from these terminologies. You have some sense of it, and now look. Try to look yourself. What is happening when I'm brushing my teeth? Do I remember later on brushing my teeth in the first place? Right? Was that an awareness to which the object appeared but was not ascertained? What did I hear? Did I hear anything? Right? What do I recollect from this morning? What do you remember from this morning when you brushed your teeth? Do you remember the sounds, the sights, the tangible objects? Those probably the least. The smell? Right? Anything? Or is this the mental consciousness planning ahead? Right? Okay. Anyway, so explaining this, again, helps us to just look a little closer at sense consciousnesses that are correct, but some more active, actually understanding their objects, and some less active. Just something appears, but there's no awareness. And these are the ones we need. During meditation, we need those. Awarenesses to which an object appears but is not ascertained. We need those. So as the Dalai Lama just recently talked about the development of calm abiding. He said, those ones we need. We need to have awarenesses to which the object appears but is not ascertained. Otherwise, calm abiding, very difficult. Okay? All right. Then there are, of course, also sense consciousnesses that are wrong consciousnesses. And then you have a very clear kind of explanation, or very extensive explanation of why a wrong consciousness arises, the sense consciousness. And the only reason I put this in here is because these sense consciousnesses, wrong consciousnesses, are always used as examples. They're favorite examples. So some of you who may have read a lot of scriptures may recognize some of these wrong consciousnesses. They're used as examples to illustrate how we are controlled by wrong mental consciousnesses. So we use the sense consciousnesses. They're also controlled by them to some degree, but they don't pose the same danger. The danger, the thing that really harms us, and we talked about this yesterday, are wrong consciousnesses that are mental, that don't perceive reality due to strong emotions, especially, that they distort what's actually there. And the moment they distort, the object's not the actual object anymore. Remember the anger? The anger does not perceive the person for who they are, even if it's anger towards the self. I mean, we've all experienced anger towards the self. It's just as harmful as anger towards others, possibly even more harmful, depending on what it makes us do. Because we're probably more likely to kill ourselves than kill someone else. Okay? Or harm ourselves in a way. I mean, a lot of examples of people slashing themselves. I mean, I'm not even... but I mean, I've heard a lot of young people especially, like so much frustration and anger with themselves, that is actually physical hurt. People cutting themselves because of that strong anger. But that anger doesn't perceive the self correctly. It doesn't perceive our good qualities. It doesn't perceive the beauty, the powerful mental consciousness we have anyway. It just looks at some negative thing, little negative thing, and blows it up big time. That's not who we are. So when we're angry with ourselves, the I it doesn't even exist. That person that we look at is not even existent. Right? How ludicrous, actually.